Welcome to the Newman Bond, the official podcast of Newman University. I'm Amy Brooks, and today I have the honor of being joined by Dr. John Brungardt. He's an assistant professor of medieval philosophy here at Newman, and he recently published a book called Natural Philosophy: An Introduction with the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology. So congratulations, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to be here.
And before we dive into kind of what the process was like for you to write that, can you just tell me a little bit about your background and what first drew you to philosophy?
Sure. So I grew up here in Wichita. I was homeschooled. I'm the oldest of 10.
Oh, wow.
So I had initially thought I wanted to make movies. That was my plan in high school. But I didn't go to a college that really specialized in that. I went to a small liberal arts college in California, Thomas Aquinas College.
Oh,
so that's really where I first encountered philosophy in a serious way. So after that, I went to graduate school for philosophy. So what drew me though, in my undergrad education, the way the curriculum is set up there, it's a great books approach, and some of the philosophy readings and then some of the readings that we did in the history of science, you could see there was a lot of tension and possible contradiction, and I mean sometimes outright contradiction between the different philosophical views or the different scientific views. And so I wasn't satisfied at that point. It's like, well, even if they're disagreeing, someone has to be right. Like there has to be some sort of way to resolve the debates that I was reading about. So it was also a big draw to continue in my studies, and that generally is also what got me interested in natural philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, how did you end up at Newman? Were you a professor before for philosophy elsewhere?
Yeah, so as I was finishing up my graduate studies at the Catholic University of America, so in Washington, D.C., I taught there for a little bit, just not as a teaching assistant, just as a master's level, so undergrad. I taught undergrads, but at that point I only had my master's degree.
Okay.
Then as I was finishing the dissertation, I taught here and there, just more on a temporary basis, though. Yeah, it was right before coming to Newman. I had a postdoc position, just a research position in philosophy at the Pontifical University of Pontifical University of Chile in Santiago, so down in South America. So I was there for basically 2.5 years. I got married during that time. My wife's from California, though, so she came down there, and we were there for basically 1.5 years. So that's where from there I came to Newman.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm curious. I know as a former Newman student, I remember the ethics class I was taking that really kind of opened my eyes to different philosophical perspectives. Do you remember a moment in time where your interest was maybe first piqued in philosophy, or it really started to click for you? What age you were? Or what you were doing?
I don't remember a specific moment. What I remember about the reading books for the ethics course in junior year is I would be in the library and I would fall asleep.
Oh.
So it took me a while to appreciate that side of philosophy in a more serious way. I think what really the two books that I read in undergrad, and I did my senior project on them. So these were both also during junior year. One was Isaac Newton's Principia, so where he essentially invents modern physics. He had help, but the short version of it is he invents modern physics in that book. And then there's a book by a German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, who it's called The Critique of Pure Reason, that he claims to have provided the perfect philosophical explanation to what Newton just did. And I thought that was completely, well, other people think it's completely wrong too. But when I encountered that, I thought that's completely wrong. So that really, alongside reading a whole bunch of Aristotle, like Aristotle really kept me grounded, as it were, on how would you evaluate such competing claims. So I would say it was really junior year that for one of the first times I saw a complex problem, like a really deep and far-reaching issue, whereas previously it was more in bits and pieces and cool ideas here and there. But yeah.
That makes sense. Well, it's clear you know your stuff. When it comes to philosophy, you seem to have a very well-read, well-rounded kind of, I guess, education behind you. So for you, what's the most rewarding aspect of being a professor here at Newman and teaching students and helping them kind of have those aha moments?
Yeah. So what I've taken from both undergrad and graduate education is, both of the places I went to, TAC and then CUA, the professors there, they were really good at modeling careful reading and really engaging with an author. And so that's why that's one of the things I enjoy a whole lot here at Newman is I have enough time to do that in my courses, and I have the freedom and the leisure to do it in the courses that I have. So for example, one of my courses right now, it's for philosophy majors, so it's not a gen ed course, but so this is the epistemology course, the philosophy of knowledge. And right now we're reading St. John Henry Newman's Grammar of Assent.
Oh, awesome.
And so you would have to call it a long book, and it's also a very difficult book. But Newman is a very good writer, and he gives, it's page after page of very helpful examples. So it's almost impossible to fail to have a good conversation about the book as you go through it. So it's that sort of thing. So that kind of patience to really sit with and work through what an author, especially in philosophy, is trying to communicate. Because I found it's you can have the quicker aha moments, but you really have to set something up. Like you have to build towards a deeper insight. That takes more patience.
Yeah, it comes with the work.
Yeah.
And how awesome that you get to incorporate St. John Henry Newman,
it's
our namesake, and recent doctor of the church, which is a pretty big deal.
Now I have more authority for telling them, we have to listen to this guy.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, I know you also help teach some of the seminarians who come through Newman, which is a really big part of our Catholic identity and community, and that it really seems to be growing over the years as we've developed this pipeline with this year being the biggest class of seminarians. 41
total.
Which is amazing.
Lot,
So that's a big responsibility, but for helping form the seminarians to be the best they can be and prepare them for major seminary, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
So the first thing, a few things come to mind, but the overall, it's two things, Sometimes this is, for better or worse, they'll know that this is true if they ever listen to the podcast. Sometimes they come here to Newman and they're not quite gung ho about philosophy yet.
Sometimes it takes time.
Because they want to. Many of them just want to go straight to theology, and the philosophy, it seems like a detour. So that's on the one end, that's part of the challenge, is to show different ways. Okay, no, this is how philosophy will help for your later studies in theology. So that's part of the fun, is to take that on as a challenge. It's harder at the beginning because it's not obvious.
Yes.
how it will connect, because you're still, like, the introductory classes are, you're just getting the ground under you, so you can't really, I could tell them it will be helpful later, but it's, whereas then it's more of the upper division courses, especially courses senior year, which is really easy to almost every class bring up. Here's how it will connect to theology. Especially the last course that they take, it's called natural theology. So in other places sometimes it's called philosophy of religion, but that's a bit broader umbrella, and other times it's called philosophical theology. So it's the sort of class where you go through arguments for the existence of God and which ones work and which ones don't, and things like that. So there it's pretty easy to make theological connections to the faith.
Get them a little more ramped up for what they're looking at too.
Yeah. Oh, and they've told me that reading the Grammar of Assent by Newman, that really helps later, especially for fundamental theology. So the part of theology that defends the truth of the faith and the possibility of revelation. So they've found Newman really helpful for that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being a part of that important process.
It's a lot of fun. It's a great honor. Yeah.
Man. And how do you adapt your teaching to better meet the needs? I think we recently interviewed a couple seminarians, and they brought up, he's really great at reaching out to the seminarians who are in major seminary so that he can make sure to, have oral exams if they need more skills in developing that presentation. But how do you adapt your teaching style to kind of better meet your students' needs? Yeah,
it is one thing I introduced. I forget when I started that, and it's not in all of the courses that I teach, but at one point, one of the graduates who had gone on to major seminary said, "Oh yeah, there's tons of oral exams here." Oh, we'd never do that. So I thought, well, we should at least practice that a little bit. Yes, that's one thing I did. A couple of the other, so the two other things, it's reading and writing. Like, it's going to sound very boring, but so the practice in reading and analyzing a difficult text. So just to develop the habit of expecting that certain books, even if they're very hard, like it's still worth the effort to get through them. And so that's still, like, most of the theologians that they will encounter in major seminary and the vast majority of the church's tradition, they were all formed in this perennial philosophical way of thinking. And so if they're not also formed in that, they're just they won't have enough facility with that kind of language and that style of thinking.
Extra challenging.
So yes, I always keep that in mind. And then I've kept around just the old-fashioned actual writing of papers, because I hear that. So in certain ways, I guess that's not adapting, but it's more looking ahead to what they'll need for major seminary.
Yeah. It's like a rite of passage of college too. You really can't escape without writing quite a few papers. Yeah,
that'll be a sad day if they ever get rid of that.
That would be. That would be. Well, speaking of writing, can you tell us about how your book, Natural Philosophy and Introduction, came about with the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology? Yeah,
so the ECT, the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology, is a project of a friend of mine, Father Cajetan Cuddy. He's a Dominican priest. So he's with the Eastern Province Dominicans. I'm also a member, so I'm a lay Dominican.
Oh, awesome.
So I knew him when I was out on the East Coast. And so our paths have crossed over the years. A few years ago, I translated a book, Mary Full of Grace, and he published that in one of the series that he edits.
Wow.
And so, we're also very much on the same page as far as the importance of philosophy for the study of theology. So Father Cajetan started this new online encyclopedia, and the goal of the encyclopedia is to help seminarians in their studies, and to help people teaching seminarians, and then to help other interested lay people or priests or other religious. But I mean, the priority though is for seminarians.
Okay.
So it's not your usual academic type encyclopedia where you're trying to be very thorough, and so if an expert in some other field or an adjacent, they can come in and read and kind of get the short expert level introductions. It's supposed to be much more pedagogical. And so Father Cuddy knew about some of my previous work, and so he invited me to write just the article version of natural philosophy. So what is this as a part of philosophy overall? And they liked it a lot, and they say some of those articles they're also turning into books. So there's a small Catholic handbook series that they're publishing. So mine, I think mine is I'm sure there's maybe a fourth or fifth one now, but mine was the third.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, so it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And I know you also converted either the article or the book itself into a video that's also available.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, so one of Father Cuddy's, so the organization that runs the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology, their video team and their CEO, Gideon Barr, they flew me out to Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Wow, fun.
And is kind of a setup like this, and we had more of a sit-down interview and a podcast, and then more of a formal summary of the article. So that's all. Some of that's now on YouTube, I think, but it's all through ect.org.
Okay,
So
that's good to know. That was going to be one of my questions, was where people can find the book, where people can find the video recording.
ect.org.
Perfect. That's short, sweet, and simple. So for listeners who may not know or be familiar with the term, what is natural philosophy?
Yeah, sometimes it's also called the philosophy of nature. I think the easiest way and the shortest way to think about it is before the natural sciences got started, natural science was just called natural philosophy. So in one way, it's an older style of going about scientific inquiry, but it's this sort of wondering and trying to figure out how the universe works, how the cosmos works, that we can actually do it before the experimental method, right? So even if you're going about, in what we call science now, one of the sciences, and you're using the experimental method, before you even set up the experiment, you have to have some prior knowledge about the world, such that you can then ask more detailed questions about it. And so natural philosophy is really the part of philosophy that asks philosophical questions about and tries to determine answers to that initial wonder about the natural world. So something that's common to everybody, or it's possible for everyone, whereas actually carrying out detailed experiments is not possible I guess in principle it is, but it doesn't work out in practice that everyone gets to do that. So it's Aristotle started it, like most, not all, but most things in philosophy. So how he thought about it in books like The Physics, his book on the heavens, on generation and corruption. It's really about chemistry. He was trying to start chemistry. He has books on biology, what makes an animal alive, what makes a plant alive. He has initial forays into psychology. So this sort of starting with a natural wonder about the natural world, and then as you go deeper and deeper, eventually you would discover and start one of the modern sciences. I mean,
Okay.
it just takes a long time.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of forms an extra layer of appreciation for nature in that way. Then.
Yeah, and so it's also a way that you're not compartmentalizing. Like you're trying
Right.
to.
It's all
This
connected.
is a habit. Yeah, exactly. Where you're trying to understand it all as it's as the universe itself, as the cosmos is a whole, an ordered whole. And so then I think there's this back and forth that develops. So if kind of in the order of discovery and the order of learning, you start out, if someone starts out in natural philosophy, and then you could get more detailed, you could specialize in the various sciences, and then you kind of, as it were, you go back, you can then reintegrate. So I think of it as a back and forth in that respect.
That seems like philosophy as a whole in a nutshell too, is just the back and forth of absorbing the writing and kind of interacting with it and adding your own thoughts and arguing and
and it's
learning that way.
Yeah, it also natural philosophy also prepares for, I think, other parts of philosophy like ethics.
Yes.
Right, so because human beings are part of the natural world.
Right.
I mean, we're a distinctive part, but we're still part of the natural world. So that's you can start a kind of self-knowledge of, okay, what is human nature, and that helps out with ethics, because if ethics studies, okay, what can human nature be? How can human nature flourish and achieve virtue? And it also, natural philosophy is also a necessary condition for understanding realities that are beyond the universe, right? So usually that's, in philosophy, that's called metaphysics. Sometimes it's called theology, but that gets confusing with, because usually we reserve the term theology for revealed theology.
Oh, okay.
But if you're not familiar with how the physical universe works, it's going to be difficult, I think impossible. Some people would disagree, but I think it would at least be very difficult to understand a reality beyond the physical universe, because we need something more familiar to contrast it with.
That makes sense. So in your opinion, why is natural philosophy crucial, especially in today's technology-driven world?
So last year I was on a grant project with Dr. Kelly McFall on ethics, technology, and human values. So I'll try to, Dr. McFall and I came up with lots of thoughts about that. I think that one of the first things to think about is, so something really obvious, technology is something artificial, right? It's something we produce. And how we tend to treat it nowadays, because it's so ubiquitous and it's so integral to how we function, it makes it more difficult to see natural things and precisely how they're natural, because we tend to think of the we here, I guess, is, especially the modern Western democracies. Just not there. Yeah, so we tend to treat nature as it's just the pool of resources that we can draw from to make stuff.
Yes.
And that's
unfortunate.
Yeah, and it also tends to make us, we start thinking of ourselves as something completely alien to the natural order. And so it's related. So I think how natural philosophy connects to this is that idea about using technology to kind of this command nature and conquer nature. That was originally a philosophical idea, and various people proposed it mostly in the 1600s is when it really caught on. So philosophers like René Descartes or Francis Bacon, or a little bit of Thomas Hobbes. But they proposed that as a way of understanding philosophy, to replace natural philosophy and metaphysics the way it had been understood beforehand, especially in the medieval universities. So it was a very conscious shift of how to redefine philosophy and essentially make it much more practical. So Descartes has this famous phrase where he thinks he has a practical philosophy by which we could render ourselves, as it were, the masters and possessors of nature. And so it's a very potent phrase, and so that's the I think the kind of the source of what we see now is, well, now that project has been very successful. But it was originally a philosophical redefinition of, okay, how do we treat the natural order?
Wow. That reminds me of in Genesis when God tells us that, humans will be the dwellers of the land and will take possession, in a way, over all of the animals and all the living beings. But there's a responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah. And the folks I'm talking about from the 17th century, they knew that verse.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
And some of them quoted it and said, and here's how we interpret that. So it's whereas there's a much more let's call it a theologically sound understanding of how human beings are naturally stewards of not just the environment, but are the environment in the sense of how we're really part of it. Usually now I tend to think we also consider the environment as just our surroundings, and just whereas it's a much it would be better to think about it in using the terms like ecosystem or habitat. But we tend to think of those words as, well, that just applies to animals, not us. It's like, well, that's not true.
Yeah,
we're just the sort
part of that.
Yeah, we're just a sort of animal that can use technology to construct little niches in our habitat in the ecosystem. But it's still in an ecosystem.
That's true. Well, how do you think natural philosophy helps us better understand ourselves and our place in God's creation?
Yeah. So one of the cool ideas from the more ancient and medieval thinkers is that human beings are a microcosmos. So a little universe. One of the ways they explained that was, we're also composed of elements and compounds, and we also do certain things just like plants do, like grow and reproduce. We can do various things that we share in things in common with animals, like sensation, and then we share in intellectual capacity with creatures like angels. So there's this all of the other parts of the hierarchy of the universe are kind of repeated inside human nature in its own way, and so that can sound very poetic, but it's a beautiful thought. But I think one of the things natural philosophy helps with is if you work through your experience of the natural world and see, okay, how are we going to talk about why do things change, or what are things made of? Aristotle's four causes. One of the goals of natural philosophy is you can start to see that it's not just a poetic thought; it's actually true, it's I think better. Not that truth is better than beauty. I mean, both that it's beautiful and it's true, as opposed to just being a beautiful thought.
That makes sense. I gotcha. Well, going back to your book and kind of the process that you used to create it, what scripture or philosophers helped you really publish what you wanted it to be?
Mostly on the philosophical side, I wasn't really trying to reinvent the wheel. So since the ECT is supposed to help form seminarians in the Catholic tradition, the go-to classical authors were Aristotle and St. Thomas. I refer to a whole bunch of other folks there, but essentially the structure of, well, here's what natural philosophy is, here's how you go about studying it. I plagiarized from Aristotle.
That's okay.
I guess I cited him, so it's not plagiarism.
Yeah.
There you go. And then, there's still a good bit of, not a whole lot, because I had seminarians in mind, especially as the main part of the audience. Here and there, and especially towards the end, I'd point out, well, here's how it connects to the study of theology. So the examples that I ended up using in the book, one of them was, what about the theology of the resurrection of the body? Not Christ's resurrection, although that be included, just the general resurrection. So it's the philosophical side of that is, if you go through natural philosophy, and part of that's also the study of the human person, then you can start to see very cogent reasons why resurrection makes sense. It's not just a miracle, although it is. It's not just a divine gift, although it is. But it actually makes philosophical sense, right? It's not just something random. The other example I used was kind of piggybacking off of that. Well, by studying the human person, you're also preparing to contemplate the person of Christ, since Christ has a human nature. So those were the, apart from the philosophical inspirations, those are two of the bigger scriptural theological waypoints that I used.
And what was your writing process like?
Well, at the time when I was writing it, I was preparing to teach a course in natural philosophy that semester. Yeah, so I in that sense, it came very quickly, because I wrote the article more or less how, not exactly like a course, but I was like, well, if I were reading this as a student or a teacher,
right. How would you learn
trying
this?
to teach a course like this, what would I? So there, in that sense, there wasn't much extra or unusual preparation.
Okay, well that's good. Well, since you are a professor who not only helps our seminarians, but also students of all different backgrounds and majors, why is it important for a Catholic university specifically to be asking these philosophical types of questions and helping students come to those different understandings?
So I think part of the answer to that is it's part of the mission of a Catholic university to transmit the Catholic intellectual tradition. And so a Catholic university is, in my judgment at least, one of the very few places that's still in touch with an intellectual tradition that antedates the Middle Ages. Like there's plenty of universities that have long lineages. But then the examples that I think of, well, there's usually a little, so Oxford. It's like, well, Oxford is in touch with traditions that antedate the Middle Ages, but that's because it has various little Catholic colleges like Blackfriars there or something. Whereas how university education got redefined in the 19th century or the 20th century in various ways, it really diluted or lost the depths of that tradition. So I think that's one reason, a bigger kind of umbrella reason, that a place like Newman needs to carry that on. And the more Newman-focused reason, right? Since we talk a lot about we educate our students to transform society for the common good, for the benefit of others. And so for some of the reasons we've already mentioned, like there's so philosophical ideas in natural philosophy, they're applicable today. So it's not just, well, this happens to be true, or it's an old classical idea that you can help people work through. It's like, well, again, in medical ethics, it's like most of contemporary medical ethics that's non-Catholic It's working off of an understanding of human nature or the natural order that's, you can point out various philosophical problems with it. So if you, just to take that example, so if at Newman we can point out, well, here's better ways to understand the human person, here's better ways to understand your future patients and what they need and their dignity and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful for majors across the board, whether it's pre-medical sciences or working as a professor at a university. I feel like that all comes into play and is essential to making sure that we're forming students in St. Newman's idea of the whole person, and we're able to recognize that human dignity regardless of what our faiths are, what our backgrounds may be, our personal beliefs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I just have a couple more questions for you. This is more of a curious one.
Yeah.
What inspires you outside of teaching and research?
Oh, well, I'm fortunate to have a good number of people in my life that also share the intellectual life.
That's good.
So my wife Marina, she's working on her dissertation in theology. Dissertation by research. So it's a lot of fun to talk with her about that and to see that progress. It is slow progress though, because we have 3 kids and 1 on the way, and so we're
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So it's and my kids are a lot of fun. So they're a source of inspiration because they ask lots of questions.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, Lucia is 6, Jack is 4, and Greta, Margaret Sophia, she's 2. Jack is still confused about how God can be a spirit.
Ooh,
it's like,
how do you answer that?
Doesn't he have to have a body? So then he's like, didn't Jesus have a body? And my wife was telling me the other day, he was like, Mom, in the Psalm it said God had hands, but you said God was a spirit. It's like, oh dear.
That's so fun. Oh, I love the way that kids view the world too. It's like your own, I guess, intro into philosophy of a completely different kind.
They just go right at it. They haven't developed any sort of reserve about, is this a good question right now? Yeah.
That's good. Well, how do you stay curious and encourage your students to stay curious about the world around them?
So one of the things I'm able to do here at Newman, at least for the undergrad level, they let you take classes for free. So I like to do that when I'm able to just take a class here or there.
Are you taking any now?
Yeah, I'm taking chemical thermodynamics and kinetics with Dr. Hushka.
Oh, that's fun.
The program works better. The employee benefit works a little better if you're degree seeking, so I just picked chemistry. So it's usually a science course or a math course.
Good for you.
And then one of the ways that I've found that it helps to keep students curious, and Father Joe Guile suggested this a while back, is in many of my, not all, but in many of my courses, we start with a novel. That's not literally on the course subject, because that's I don't think possible, but usually there's some
themes.
Relevant connection. And then they get really, that fires up their imagination, and then they all of a sudden have lots of questions just based off of the book, and then they see some of them are being answered in the course, but not others, and so that so I guess another way to put that is I inspired them to stay curious by not answering all of their questions.
Some things are better left open-ended. They can kind of find their own answers in a way, or maybe they'll learn more because there isn't a definite
you can't
answer.
You can't learn everything in a class.
True.
And it's, some things either don't have definite answers because we can't give them, or even if it does have a definite answer, if I just told them the answer, that's not, okay, is it going to sink in? They didn't
discover
they have to earn it.
Yeah.
Not that I try to, keep things from them. It's just, this is a very old pedagogical principle in philosophy. It goes back to Socrates. You just don't tell people the answer, or tell people here's the conclusion, or tell people here's what to think. But then you can't conflate that with, okay, but you're never going to find the truth. Like that's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. I think I would enjoy some of your classes based on some of the conversations I've heard from seminarians and just getting to sit with you today. So my final question is, if you could share your own philosophy in a nutshell for how to best live one's life, what would it be?
So I mentioned I'm a third order Dominican. And so I read a lot of, and I think a lot about what St. Thomas Aquinas wrote. It's one of the things that's sunk in over the years is many of the philosophers, or many of the different ways of life there's lots of commonalities among them. And they're all, they ultimately, as ways of life, they're ultimately searching for happiness. And so I think one of the things that St. Thomas is really clear about, though, is that in the way God has set up the world now, maybe in a different universe it would have been different, but it's not ours. A purely philosophical way of life is actually impossible, which is kind of a shocking. When I first really understood that, it was kind of a shocking thing. It's like, I thought St. Thomas was on the philosopher's side.
Right.
So he's not saying that philosophy is useless. It's just, if you try to do it all with philosophy, that's impossible, right? God's providence is married. He's put together, reason and faith have to go together, right? So nature and grace have to go together. So that's something that's sunk in over the years more, is that we really we tend to want to try to do things on our own and make ourselves happy.
Right.
Figuring out some philosophical system or other, or making more money, or whatever floats your boat. But it's there's really a deep dependence of human nature upon grace, and that takes at least for me, it took a while to realize, and I'm still realizing it more and more. So that's if we're trying to give here's a philosophy to follow, it's like, well, what the philosopher, the quote unquote pure philosopher, has to realize is that ultimately pure philosophy is insufficient, and it's dependent upon something that it can't give itself. Yeah.
That reminds me, for some reason, of the quote, "He who knows best knows how little he knows," because sometimes it's so overwhelming to think of, like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I don't know, I'll never understand, even if I dive deep into all of these different philosophical readings, or whatever the interest may be. It can be across the board. But then there's almost that piece in, like, God has this all figured out, and we will someday have the truth, but it's okay to just take things, in small bits and pieces as we can right now, and it's okay to not know everything, and just try your best.
No, and there's something that's a lot like St. John Henry Newman in that he, obviously incredibly erudite, but he is also, some of his prayers, there you can see there's a piece of he's surrendering himself
Yes, that's
to
a good
God's
word.
providence.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for taking the time to answer all my questions. And again, congratulations on your book. And you said listeners and readers can find it at ect.org?
Yes,
okay.
ect.org. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. We release new episodes of the Newman Bond podcast every first and third Tuesday of the month. So we will see you next time.
I get a lot more blessings out of it.
Really fun experience.
Really the Newman experience.